The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for today's edition to the Canadian Tree Fund webinar, which aims to bring relevant topics in arboriculture and urban forestry to Canadian arborists. Today's presentation is Structural and Functional Connectivity of Urban Greenspaces. Our presenters today are Finn, Ben, and Nick, three senior undergraduate students in the Faculty of Forestry at the University of British Columbia. Finn and Nick are students in the Bachelor of Urban Forestry program, and Ben is a student in the Bachelor of Science in Natural Resource Conservation. The Canadian Tree Fund extends a big thank you to the presenters for joining us here today. A reminder to all attendees that you're welcome to send questions into the chat as we go, and we'll turn it over to Finn, Nick, and Ben to take it away. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you, Alex. And yeah, welcome everyone. Hello, thanks for joining us. So as Alex has said, today we're talking about ecological connectivity and some of its applications to urban forest management. So to start off, many research questions stem from random curiosity or observations made in everyday situations. Some of these observations led us to thinking about ecological connectivity in the urban environment surrounding us. For example, have you ever watched bees passing through backyards, not caring about fences or walls? Have you ever seen a little seedling grow in a planter or soil without another individual of its species anywhere nearby? Birds hunting and returning food to the nest from adjacent green spaces. Squirrels climbing through intertwined branches in the search for nuts. All of these are examples of the ways that urban habitats allow species to travel around cities. The research we are sharing with you today explores this idea to look at how seeing cities as a network of habitats can contribute to building a healthy, resilient urban forest.
We're excited to share the results of our research with you today, but first I will tell you a little bit of the story behind this project. Finn, Ben, and I are all fourth-year undergraduate students, and this project has been a combined effort from all of us coming together and learning more about the urban forest on UBC's campus. It first started when I received an opportunity to pursue a research project on the themes of biomimicry and ecological connectivity as a co-op back in the winter of 2021. The project was offered through the SEED Sustainability Program. What this program does is it connects students to with interests in sustainability topics to faculty advisors and members of UBC's operational staff who are interested in research to implement and inform the policies they work with. In this case, I was connected with the Green Buildings team in UBC's campus, the Community Planning Department, and the team at the UBC Botanical Garden. So I started out trying to soak in as much information as I could about biomimicry and ecological connectivity in an attempt to understand how the two topics relate. Before I began researching ecological connectivity, at first I was reminded of a forest ecology class I took with Dr. Suzanne Simard, where we learned about the connectivity of mycorrhizal networks in forests. In case anyone hasn't heard about this, these are fungal pathways that have been demonstrated to transfer nutrients, carbon, and communications through a symbiosis with connected plants. Dr. Simard is an influential pioneer in the field of mycorrhizal networks, and her lectures sparked my curiosity for learning more about mycorrhizae. Along the way, I collaborated with my colleague Finn and Ben. Each of them had a similar interest in different parts of the research, and we cooperated to expand on some of the ideas from my initial research. That was how this project was born, and we will be sharing the results with you today.
So there are a few things that we're hoping you can learn about today. First, we will discuss the important concepts like ecological connectivity, structural and functional connectivity, and what the existing research says about how they relate to increased biodiversity, ecosystem function, and a resilient and adaptive urban forest in the face of climate change. Next, we'll discuss the theory and process behind the GIS methods we use to transform the map of campus green spaces into metrics of connectivity, a full node and link network of the urban forest, and an analysis of functional connectivity. After that, we'll talk about how we identified areas of high and low ecological connectivity using our tools, what this means for the UBC campus, how mycorrhizae and biomimicry fit into this project, and how this can be used to make decisions both on campus and elsewhere. Finally, we'll talk about how future research can build on this project and what we might do to fine-tune this methodology.
All right, so next up, we're gonna go through some of the definitions. First, what is the urban forest? So although the practice of urban forestry has been defined in many research papers, what constitutes urban forests isn't discussed much in the literature. Often it is described as all trees and plants, both public and private, within and around cities and rural areas. However, for the purpose of this research, the campus urban forest is defined as all the vegetated spaces and soils on campus and the plants, animals, and fungi which inhabit them on both public and private land. This definition adds a more complete view of urban forests, closer to their natural forest counterparts. Forests are more than just the sum of their trees, and our ecological conception of urban forests should reflect and try to emulate that.
So even though many of the types of organisms and habitats found in cities are also found in natural areas, urbanization gives cities a very unique combination of changing temperatures, hydrology, and disturbances that make it harder to apply the same ecological rules that work in other ecosystems. The field of urban ecology looks at these differences found in cities to try and learn more about how cities work as ecosystems. One of the most important defining features of cities is the grid of impervious surfaces formed by streets and the built environment. Urban habitats exist inside of this matrix of non-habitat, and that means they're almost always very separated and fragmented compared to the natural landscape.
All right, next up, we're going to be talking about ecological connectivity. So, ecological connectivity is the study of both the spatial distribution of landscapes and the dispersal of distinct species through habitat patches that are influenced by their behavior and interactions. The literature often only looks at one aspect of connectivity in isolation, resulting in an incomplete understanding of the concept. Ecological connectivity is a combination of both structure and function. Therefore, when we're explaining this in the campus context, we're going to separate these two terms. So first, we're going to go over structural connectivity, which is the spatial distribution of habitat affecting the influence green spaces have on each other. And the functional connectivity definition that is project specific for us is how actors in the UBC food web move through the green spaces on campus and how they are influenced by other present species. So, why are they important? Before diving into the specific research components of this project, we would like to demonstrate how ecological connectivity influences other factors of ecology and ecosystem quality with information gathered from a literature review. So first off, ecological connectivity is shown to increase dispersal of species and biodiversity. In 2017, researchers Melliger, Rusterholz, and Bauer looked at habitat factors that affected the behavior and diversity among grasshoppers, butterflies, and vascular plants in Basel, Switzerland. They found that although habitat size played a large role in biodiversity, a better indicator of butterfly and grasshopper diversity was the presence and accessibility of adjacent green spaces. Connectivity also increases ecosystem function. In turn, ecological functions are also generally enhanced by biodiversity. Because some species are more functional than others, they have different specific traits that allow them to perform better. Having more unique species in the same ecosystem increases the probability that species which are more functional will be present, meaning more carbon is sequestered, more flowers are pollinated, etc. Additionally, we also are trying to build a resilient and adaptive urban forest in the face of climate change. Biodiversity and ecosystem function both enhance the adaptive capacity and climate resilience of ecosystems. One way to illustrate this is by using the analogy of an airplane with rivets holding the wings together. The plane may use a few rivets after a shock in the same way species could be lost in an ecosystem as the climate changes. However, it will still be able to fly as there are redundant rivets in the same way other species may have also performed the same functions. And to quote Pearson, to make this a little bit clearer, connectivity also shapes how disturbance spreads through ecosystems and modifies the strength of ecological processes affecting ecosystem resilience.
Any green space on campus can be geographically represented as a polygon in a GIS. UBC maintains a GitHub repository that includes GIS data for a variety of features on campus. Within that repository is a dataset that contains polygon data for all the soft landscapes on campus, which are essentially vegetated areas with soil, and some of their attributes, such as the type of green space. In combination with the data from an ongoing inventory of street trees on campus, these soft landscape polygons form the basis for much of our analysis. The foundation of the tool we are talking about today is based on the buffer of each of these soft landscape polygons. A buffer in a GIS context is essentially a zone around a soft landscape that represents part of the influence that a soft landscape polygon has on its surroundings. A tree is intimately attached to its local area and has no choice but to converse with its immediate surroundings. In order to increase the chances of survival for generations to come, the tree creates conditions conducive to more life by providing habitat for a diversity of species above and below ground. In an urban environment, pollinators fly from soft landscape to soft landscape, while trees produce pollen and seeds that disperse into their surroundings. For this GIS analysis, I buffered every soft landscape on campus by 10 meters, ran a tool that calculated all the intersecting buffers for each polygon, then ran another tool to count the number of overlapping buffers for each polygon to produce the result of soft landscape polygons with embedded connectivity metrics. A two-lane road at UBC with bicycle lanes on either side is approximately 10 meters wide. Therefore, any soft landscapes that are not directly across the street from one another would not have buffers that intersect. This distance was also chosen for ecological reasons, as a rough estimate for the minimum dispersal ranges for many smaller organisms, fungal hyphae, and animal dispersed seeds from street trees. The areas of the UBC campus that are 10 or more meters away from any soft landscape are referred to as dead zones in this project because these are areas of extensive gray infrastructure development that likely impede the ecological connectivity of the UBC campus. Dead zone areas contribute to habitat fragmentation, which decreases the flow of genes from one population to another. Soft landscapes with a higher frequency of overlapping buffers are considered to have more structural ecological connectivity with their surrounding landscape. Soft landscapes with a higher area measurement are likely to have higher ecological connectivity than soft landscapes with a low area measurement. Also, a soft landscape with trees is likely to have higher ecological connectivity than a soft landscape without trees. Operating under these assumptions, I exported the frequency of overlapping buffers, tree counts on each soft landscape, and the polygon area data to Microsoft Excel, then proceeded to calculate tree density of each soft landscape polygon. All three metrics were then scaled from 0 to 1. In an Excel column labeled importance, the average of the three scaled metrics, frequency, tree density, and area, was calculated, then applied back to the soft landscapes, where the soft landscapes are extruded in 3D by their importance metric. The importance attribute is meant to be a more accurate and holistic measure of ecological connectivity because the metric accounts for the tree density and area data in addition to the frequency data.
So after a conversation with Nick about how his results might be visualized, I was curious to learn more about what could be done with the data. Having also taken Dr. Simard's forest ecology course, I remember the node and link model that was used to visualize the network of root connections within a forest stand. I decided to try and attempt the same to look at how the network of green spaces might compare. My goal was to make a map of the entire campus with the nodes or hubs as individual green spaces and the links showing which green spaces were connected to one another. To do this, I needed to know three things. Firstly, which green spaces were connected to which other green spaces. Second, how strong this connection was for each relationship. And thirdly, the location of the start and end points for each link. I first used Nick's original model to record for any green space which other green spaces it was connected to. Next, I summarized these relationships into a list of unique connections. For each connection, by calculating how much of the smaller green space was overlapped by the larger green space of the two, I could have some metric for how connected the two were. Finally, all that was left was to place a point in the centroid of each polygon to create the nodes and work out the difference in coordinates between the 2 points that made up a connection to create the linking lines between them. These lines were made thicker or thinner based on the relative strength of the connection. You can see an example from this first map here on the screen. Looking at this map, I noticed that some areas, like the nodes on the right-hand side, seem to be disconnected from the larger network. I wondered if there was a way to check which green spaces were accessible within the network, but with over 37,000 unique relationships, I couldn't do it manually. Instead, I turned to ArcGIS built-in network analyst tools, specifically the service area tool. This works similarly to Google Maps on your phone. You select a starting location and it looks at all the possible places that can be reached within a given distance. So I started from a well-connected point, ran the tool, and extracted all of the points that it said it was unable to reach. You can see here on the next slide, these disconnected dead points are marked in red. But I still felt there was more we could learn from this network. I used Kumu, a free online tool that can be used to map large network data sets. With this, I could do two main things. One, I could show the network in a different layout. Here you can see on the left, the original geographic layout. To make it easier to see the transformation, I've colored the model based on latitude. North is blue and south is red. On the right, you can see the force-directed layout, where the network is in its simplest shape. This is created by essentially treating every connection as a rubber band and allowing the network to spring into its most comfortable shape. This is really useful for looking at patterns in the overall structure. For example, notice how at the middle latitudes corresponding to the academic core of the campus, there are wider holes in the network and it looks a little bit like melted cheese. In these parts of campus, the green spaces follow more linear corridors around the dense built environment. In these places, it is more difficult to travel within the network. Species can only move through the linear pathways formed by the vegetation. The second thing that Kumu does is to analyze the network and calculate a number of metrics. There are about 12 different metrics that can be calculated, but I'm just going to talk about one of the most important ones, betweenness centrality. Betweenness centrality measures how many times an element lies on the shortest path between two other elements. What does this mean on campus? If I'm a small mammal, for example, and I want to travel to another green space on the other side of campus, the betweenness of a green space can be used to measure the likelihood that I will need to cross it on my journey. Usually, nodes with high betweenness have more control over the flow of information in the network and act as key bridges. They can also be potential single points of failure. For example, the large green space labeled 4467 on the top left has the highest betweenness in the network. This means that it lies on the shortest path between the most other green spaces. This is understandable as this point represents the forest at the UBC farm, a large green space in a central place on campus. However, this also means that the farm forest represents an important strategic location in maintaining ecosystem health, as it has a strong influence on the movement of species through the ecosystem. By taking what we know about the urban forest and transforming it into this type of network model that allows for these types of complex calculations, we can gain access to some really powerful new ways of learning about how these urban forest habitats interact with one another. They can offer clues on how we can mimic the design of nature for resilience. One way we can accomplish this is through modularity.
In this simplified example network, each of these groups of nodes and links is called a module. A network with a high degree of modularity is self-assembled into interconnected communities, aka modules, that are strung together by an optimized number of connections. A network with a high degree of modularity is resilient because it is more likely than a non-modular network to continue functioning after a shock to the system. Researchers have recently analyzed the network of mycorrhizal fungi associations with a host tree and found that the assemblage calmly displays modularity. Mycorrhizal fungi are agents of complex adaptive systems that can help the forest community as a whole become more resilient to anthropogenic climate change impacts, such as landscape homogenization, pest outbreaks, and extreme weather events, such as drought. Let's think like a biomimic to understand one of the methods mycorrhizae employ to increase resilience. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of different species of mycorrhizal fungi can connect with the host tree. All of these species of mycorrhizal fungi manage to coexist with one another. When a tree is given enough time to form a diversity of mycorrhizal associations, the mycorrhizae often self-assemble into groups of fungal species called modules. The figure to the right is a screenshot from the web map tool with the map extent showing an area of East Campus. The three hubs of nodes and links circled in red are examples of soft landscapes groups that display a high degree of modularity. When we start mapping our soft landscapes on the UBC campus as proximity-based networks, areas of high and low modularity are revealed. By designing soft landscape communities to express modularity, we are in essence mimicking the strategy that mycorrhizal fungi employ to design their species community networks. By applying a modular landscape design to an urban forest, we are taking the network characteristic of modularity, which is known to indicate resilience, then employing the modular design to the urban forest. Network modularity is widely agreed to be a strong indicator of ecosystem resilience. By implementing a modular soft landscape design strategy to areas of low ecological connectivity, we are more likely to adapt to climate change impacts such as rising temperatures, extreme weather events, and biodiversity loss, because this proposed network design strategy promotes resilience within the green infrastructure network. The species diversity that brings forth modularity within mycorrhizal fungi communities helps to prevent disturbances in a forest ecosystem from cascading throughout the entire network. To show this in action, here we have Ben's network model. The user pooling on a node is analogous to a disturbance to the ecosystem. When I pool on a node in this interconnected modular section, the disturbance doesn't ripple out, and it recovers to a stable state. Here we have low interconnectivity and low modularity. So when the user pools on the node, the disturbance propagates throughout more of the network. Finally, we have high interconnectivity and low modularity. Here you can see a disturbance quickly spreads into a big portion of the network.
Okay, and so after this, seeing mixed structural connectivity analysis made me curious about further applications of the concept. After reading about ecological connectivity, specifically the distinction between structure and function, and discussing applications with Nick and Ben, I wanted to incorporate the data from UBC's tree inventory to try and map the functional connectivity of campus green spaces using the ecological principle of food webs. Ecosystems are comprised of all the living organisms within the landscape and the interactions they share between each other. Traditional conceptions of food webs categorize actors within different trophic levels, which facilitate energy transfer within the ecosystem through consumption and excretion. At the very base of these trophic levels are the autotrophs, which are organisms that produce their own food, for example, photosynthesizing plants. Every other trophic organism in the system relies on this trophic baseline, either directly, herbivores, or indirectly, carnivores and insectivores. Therefore, to map these food webs, an effective method is analyzing these autotrophs and the species they support. Food webs, however, can be incredibly complex systems of interactions that are hard to visualize. Presenting this data in a useful manner is key to understanding the application of food webs to real ecosystems. Mapping these webs and applying them to an actual landscape can somewhat mitigate the abstractness of these systems. To achieve this, I added the tree species point data from UBC's tree inventory to the existing structural connectivity network to visualize the functional connectivity of campus green spaces by looking at the composition of their basal trophic layer. Using the UBC soft landscape and UBC tree inventory data sets, I created an ArcGIS map and model that outputs a layer highlighting the tree species diversity of each soft landscape polygon on UBC campus. This layer on its own already has some planning application, highlighting exemplary green spaces that can serve as planting guides to maximize resilience and function. To create this map, I first had to conduct a spatial join of the UBC tree point and the soft landscape polygon data to determine which green spaces contained which individual tree points. After this, I ran a summary analysis that collected the amount of unique species name of each tree point and the total number of individual trees within, creating a biodiversity score for each polygon. However, I also had to account for the size of each individual soft landscape and its capacity to support multiple diverse species of trees. The layer factors in the size and supporting capacity of the polygon and combines it with the assigned biodiversity score. This scaling lets the map prioritize large soft landscapes that could support many different trees but lack tree species diversity. Identifying these areas that underutilize the size and often ecologically beneficial habitat characteristic yields valuable input for sustainable planning. An example of these exemplary green spaces is a polygon located in the southwest corner of campus that has an exceptionally high species diversity, both over and understory. Sorry, Nick, can you switch the slide? Yeah, as you can see in the bottom right, this polygon has well, you can't see in the picture, but it has 10 distinct tree species out of a total of 13 trees. It has a very diverse understory with a lot of shrubs, and it has diverse site features that feature slope and creating smaller microclimates. Okay, so following this principle of uncovering underperforming green spaces, I wanted to combine the structural connectivity assessment Nick made with the biodiversity analysis to produce a map of the functional connectivity of campus. Combining spatial structure of green space polygons with species-specific data can visualize the role that biodiversity plays within ecological connectivity. This second model produces a layer highlighting green spaces that are not fully utilizing their spatial composition by lacking diverse plants to facilitate ecological function. This can be very valuable for increasing the ecological capacity of existing and future campus ecosystems, ensuring green spaces are designed to utilize their full potential. An example of such a green space is a hill located in the center of campus, as you can see again in the bottom right. This green space, unfortunately, is roughly the same size as the previous example. However, it only supports 3 trees that are all of the same species, red maple. And it even features similar slope characteristics and a lot of open free soil. So this has a lot of potential to host more diverse sets of tree species. And next up, we would like to go through some of the recommendations and also a little bit of a summary of the different points gathered throughout our individual research projects. So to review, here are the different pieces of information we have learned. From Nick's model, we found metrics for structural connectivity. From Ben's analysis, we gained connectivity network models and betweenness metrics. And from my model, we found biodiversity and functional connectivity metrics. From these data sets, we can make a few conclusions on how to prioritize specific areas to enhance the ecosystem's resilience. From this list of different ways to prioritize, we need more research to determine the best methods, but we think that network hub areas and the underperformers are the most important overall.
There are also strategies we can use in a landscape design to enhance connectivity within the study area. Green corridors and habitat stepping stones are 2 design components that can increase soft landscape network modularity. A green corridor is often thought of as a thin strip of soft landscape that can facilitate the movement of wildlife. If green corridors are implemented in the form of rain gardens or bioswales, then in addition to having the ecological connectivity of our campus increase, stormwater mitigation benefits will also occur. Green corridors are an easy biophilic design element to implement, mostly because the size and shape of a green corridor can be manipulated to fit within the surrounding environment. In fact, UBC is in the process of identifying potential areas for enhanced green corridors as part of its emerging land use plan update. If there's not enough room below ground, if there's not enough room above ground to implement a green corridor, UBC could experiment with underground corridors that connect existing soft landscapes below ground. Assuming space is available below ground, then soil corridors could help conserve soil on campus and also may create more room for tree roots and mycorrhizal fungi to grow. Soil cages could be installed underground to help prevent soil compaction and to create room for a soil corridor. When providing a direct connection through a green corridor is not possible, creating habitat stepping stones is an option that increases the frequency of overlapping buffers. Implementing habitat stepping stones allows for a new pathway for many organisms to disperse, while also increasing the permeable land area for stormwater management benefits. Green roofs can act as stepping stones that can increase the strength of a module and reduce the dead zone area on campus. There are many other benefits of biophilic design elements like green corridors and stepping stones. Urban forest cover helps to reduce the urban heat island effect. Therefore, hot summer days, which are increasing in frequency due to climate change, will be more tolerable and less likely to induce heat stroke. As climate change becomes more severe, the danger caused by urban heat island effect will increase, making these design considerations all the more important.
All right, and as mentioned earlier, the functional connectivity map aims to identify underperforming green spaces that are not fully utilizing their structural capacity. UBC's Climate Action Plan 2030 already mentions a commitment to increase ecosystem resilience on campus, making the map an effective tool of what green spaces to prioritize. Although increasing the biodiversity of a green space isn't always easy, past public reactions to removing trees for development have shown how controversial altering existing canopy can be. Adding or replacing tree species is not a viable option due to the cost and logistics being too high. As mentioned before, canopy stratification is a major driver of biodiversity and ecosystem function. The understory is often unutilized planting space and can serve as a planting opportunity to increase on-site biodiversity. These shrubs can be planted in the soil or in planters depending on soil quality. Species selected for these plantings need to have the correct shade tolerance, water needs, and facilitate some kind of ecosystem function, such as habitat of food or food production for wildlife. If conditions are suitable, native understory species could be planted too, such as trailing blackberry, Rubus ursinus, sword fern, Polysticum mutinum, or other native pollinator plants. To monitor changes in biodiversity and functional connectivity, data on the understory diversity is needed. A project that has been planning for quite some time is the UBC Shrub Inventory, in addition to the UBC Tree Inventory that would map and identify all shrubs on campus. This project would follow similar steps as the tree inventory with a few different measured variables. This data could uncover very valuable information on both inter and intra canopy diversity.
So the structural connectivity analysis is overall flexible, and it can be modified to suit a variety of objectives. That said, there's of course the old proverb that all models are wrong, but some models are more wrong than others. And parts of the model can be fine-tuned as more is learned about the specific ways that habitats connect to one another. For example, the choice of a single 10-meter buffer size across all green spaces is a big simplification of how these processes actually work. The actual radius would probably change depending on the specifics of the individual green space, but more data is needed to learn about how this might work. This analysis also did not take into account the effect that buildings likely have on ecological connectivity. Future research could explore this to learn about how the existing built environment may change the network structure. In the analysis of functional connectivity, citizen science data from sources like iNaturalist and eBird could also be included to give a bit more of a holistic picture on how species might use these different types of habitats on campus.
And another future project that could be in the creation is a species-specific network analysis that I personally like to refer to as Campus Squirrel Vision. Using the habitat and dietary information of an organism, for example squirrels, to exclusively select polygons containing plant species that share ecological interactions with said organism, for example acorn-bearing oak trees. This node and link model could highlight species-specific dead zones and other areas that could be impeding connectivity. This project, however, would require a lot of additional data, including wildlife data sets that list species interactions and could be applied to different wildlife as long as they have ecological information. A similar method was created to map ecological connectivity with AI-powered simulations. In their research, Vogt et al. Explore mathematical models that aim to predict how different wildlife families move through a structurally complex landscape based on behavioral data. The output of Squirrel Vision could inform green space management practices to enhance dispersal of select taxa.
Modularity is a pattern common to many other networks, such as the neurons and axons within our brains. The image on the left is a diagram of an optimized habitat patch design that allows for a hub of biodiversity in the middle and corridors to allow for exchange with its environment. I took this diagram from a book I read over break titled Principles of Ecological Landscape Design. The image on the right is a diagram of a neuron. By designing modular ecological landscapes in urban areas, not only are we mimicking patterns within mycorrhizal networks, we are also coming one step closer to creating a city that functions collectively as a brain. So that is our presentation. Thank you all so much for listening. And I think it's time now for any questions.
Thanks, guys. That was terrific. There's a few questions in the chat already, but a reminder to any of the attendees here to keep sending them into the question box, and we'll work our way through them. So the very first one is perhaps a longer question, and it's about applying this type of research outside of UBC and towards kind of the areas of planning and landscape. To see how we can create these green corridors and plan for them in city design, perhaps after the development has occurred or beforehand, and kind of doing these models on a more theoretical pre-construction environment. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Again, message this to you if you'd like.
Yeah. So kind of to talk about the first part about like how this is applicable, specifically the structural connectivity. It's kind of very reliant on the data that you have. So something that was like really elemental to doing this research was having the soft landscape polygon data. So as long as you have geospatial data of the different like soil patches and the habitat, you can start with this like structural connectivity analysis. Doing this before development or construction could be hard unless you, have the plan and you know what the future landscape is going to look like. But yeah, you do to do this analysis, you do need the soft landscape polygon data set.
Yeah, and you can kind of informally make that soft landscape polygon data set. You can like go within like a GIS, like ArcGIS Pro or something, and you can create polygons. Like say you have a satellite image, you can just like draw those polygons over that image. And then once you have that collection of polygons, then you can run all these different analyses similar to what we did with our project.
And a third point to that, on the note of, although it is more difficult to create these kind of specific networks before the environment has been built, kind of the proactive style of retaining green space is obviously the most cost-effective and kind of overall beneficial to the ecosystem if it happens before development takes place. As well, on UBC campus specifically, you can kind of apply this model by looking at these areas of low connectivity. And if you remember from the spatial pattern of the network model, the areas in the center of campus are kind of those areas with wider gaps. And that's exactly what UBC is targeting with its green corridors. There's one, for example, that's aiming to run kind of directly through that section of the network.
Terrific. Another question here is kind of related to what you're just talking about with protection. I'll send it into you guys in the chat here. So can you discuss how to protect important areas? So areas with high betweenness, high modularity. A second question that relates to that is we know that there's things like tree protection bylaws. Could those same style of bylaws be applied to things like pocket parks or large green areas if you're looking at private landscapes?
On the note of areas with high betweenness, I would say that's because they're kind of important for species to traverse through. It's overall important to protect them from development and kind of keep them as retained green spaces. As well, what it kind of allows you to do is to really focus in on these specific areas and look at what species are present, and then from those species make kind of plans on how to target their specific needs.
Also, to join in on the like how to protect these areas that have either high modularity or high betweenness, you would obviously want to make them as resilient as possible. And as Ben said, you would want to try to like have diverse set of species present, particularly plants, in these green spaces to make sure that the resilience and their climate adaptive capacity is at its highest possible.
And it's also important to even acknowledge that or do the analysis to even show, like say policymakers, that these areas have high modularity. So once like say you could do this, you could do the GIS analysis on your own and show that as an example of like why this area needs to be protected.
On a point you were saying earlier, Nick, about using ArcGIS Pro and satellite imagery to map these areas, is it possible to do these analyses at a much larger scale or a comparative scale and say, okay, here's how some of these different cities compare in their metrics?
Yeah, definitely. The scale it can be flexible. It can, if you want to do it for say like all of the city of Vancouver, that's definitely possible. There is that data out there, and it would produce a different result than what we found. And it's to be very interesting to do that and then see what conclusions you can draw or what say protections you can make. So it definitely is possible. And, you know, if you don't have the data, you can still use that satellite imagery.
Yeah, and not only is the scale of looking at the soft landscape polygons variable, you can also look at this on a landscape scale. So the paper that I mentioned earlier, Vogt et al., they did their connectivity analysis powered by AI, having a simulated animal move through a very diverse set of landscapes with many different cover types. So this ecological connectivity can also be applied to more natural areas or on bigger scales, like how these land cover types facilitate movement. This can be done on very large scale landscape fragments.
Yeah, so with the question Bridget posted in the chat, if we could expand on how high modularity is linked to high resilience. We're happy to share my screen and go back to this video of Ben's network model. And when we play it, you can see this right here is an example of a module. And then when he pulls on it, that's analogous to a disturbance. And so as you can see, this module here, when it's getting pulled on, it doesn't get the disturbance of it doesn't get propagated too much through the system. Whereas this one, if you pull on it, it propagates, and the impact of it is more severe and like impacting through the whole system. So I hope that helps explain, expand on how modularity is linked to resilience.
And just to maybe connect it back to kind of a real world example, kind of the ideal is to have both high connectivity and high modularity. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. So with high connectivity, you get that benefit of allowing species to disperse and travel through the network and have access to more habitat, as well as with high modularity. It's a little bit more challenging for things like pathogens and disturbances to travel through the network and kind of infiltrate the entirety of the urban forest.
And on that note, Ben, for the arborists on the call, if you're talking about kind of limiting issues spreading through those areas of connectivity, when we look at things like Dutch elm disease, there's a very hard focus on taking trees out quickly so that those fungal pathogens don't spread. This connectivity analysis that you're doing, you talked about fungi earlier on. What role does that play for things like Dutch elm disease, for example, that has root inoculation where the two roots graft to each other and the fungal network spread through those grafts? Does that help support kind of the initiatives that arborists and Dutch elm disease programs go through with trying to take these things out quickly so that they don't spread through your kind of areas of connectivity?
Yeah, so I think here there is an importance in, again, looking at both structural connectivity and functional connectivity. So the structural connectivity referring to basically the spatial distribution of these trees or of these landscapes. If this is a very structurally connected area, obviously the dispersal of organisms, not only wildlife, but fungi, is accelerated. However, the main thing that ups the resilience or increases the resilience in these cases would be the functional connectivity, which is the amount of different and unique species that would hopefully make the system a little bit more resilient and stop the spread. Obviously, if you can go in and remove the tree manually and make sure that the host of the pathogen is gone, I think that would be ideal. But having these functionally connective green spaces could increase the resilience and try to limit the spread as much as possible by utilizing unique or different tree species that aren't affected by the same pathogen.
Yeah, and to expand on that, going back to this example of a modular network, say if each of these nodes were trees, and say this node got Dutch elm disease. So essentially it probably will likely spread to these other nodes in this specific module, but it's less likely to spread to the other modules essentially. So like yes, like increasing ecological connectivity can help spread like diseases or like invasive species, but with modularity, it kind of gets a bit compartmentalized and is less likely to spread throughout the entire urban forest.
So at the end of the day, what would your suggestions be for arborists in terms of planting or other management? What can arborists do, perhaps in tree planting, to help support the type of design that you're coming about here?
Plant biodiverse tree species probably would be the biggest thing, because that's kind of what's going to really limit the ability of these pathogens to spread, is having kind of non-trees that can't host them interspersed between the trees that can.
Yeah, and also like to kind of like addressing what arborists could do. Arborists aren't very involved, I guess, in the structural connectivity aspect. We're planning the distribution of green spaces, but in the functional connectivity play a huge role, as Ben said, increasing biodiversity, not only to limit disease outbreak, but also to facilitate ecosystem function. So having a biodiverse set of trees and also understory, like having a very stratified canopy, creates habitat, food, it has so many ecosystem functions that making sure that this biodiversity, not only in the tree canopy, but in general, is at its maximum.
And Bridget's posted another question in the chat here that says, could you expand on how the force-based layout was developed, the cheese slide showing the holes in the network?
Nick, do you want to put it up on the screen again?
I'm just going to go to it.
Yeah, definitely. So this is actually a built-in function that Kumu has, and it's essentially it disconnects the green space from its specific location in space and allows it to kind of move freely, and then it takes the forces that would act on it if every connection was like a rubber band and had kind of tension, and basically just allows it to transform into the shape that has the lowest tension across all of the different points. And you can see that effect a little bit in the video that Nick was showing earlier, where as you pull on one point, the rest of the model kind of follows, because it's essentially working as a force pulling on the rest of the nodes. Does that? Okay, perfect.
Awesome, thank you. So we don't have any more questions in the question chat. So with that, it's 12:52, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for the webinar. Big thanks to Finn, Ben, and Nick for presenting. As Bridget's posted in the chat there, all the CUs will be automatically applied to your account if you're a CU holder, an ISA member, certified arborist. Before we bid adieu, as always, the Canadian Tree Fund invites you to consider donating to the organization to help continue funding arboriculture research and education in Canada. I've posted the link in the chat, and donations of $20 or more are issued a tax receipt. The Canadian Tree Fund is a registered charitable organization. It was established in 1995 in affiliation with the Ontario chapter of the International Society of Arboriculture. In tandem with ISAO, the Canadian Tree Fund helps to fund arboricultural research in Canada. By donating today, you are helping to grow the arboriculture industry of tomorrow. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your support. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for our presenters for joining us, and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Thanks everyone for joining.